Welcome back to Bazooka Kickboxing and MMA. In today's episode, we're going to discuss 5 different things that I wish I did in my 20s in the beginning of my career. Lately on YouTube, I've seen a lot of videos of people posting about things they wish they did in their early 20s or early on in their career. So that really got me thinking this weekend. So I put together 5 different points in different areas I wish I worked on a little earlier on in my career. And the one I think a lot of people are gonna agree with, and this is why it's my number one, it's stretching, yoga, and mobility. Too many times, especially when we're young, we take advantage of our youthness and be able to just get into training, jump out and get right into sparring or right into our pad work. But as we get older, we need that little bit of time to making sure we stretch. Now that I'm in my 30s, I make sure I actually stretch twice a day. It's part of my morning routine where I wake up, I have my coffee, and I stretch right away. And then I notice throughout the day, my strength and conditioning has gotten better. My flexibility and my recovery from my workouts and my intense sparring sessions has been a lot better. Especially if you've been kicking and doing martial arts for many years, you'll notice different parts of your body get really tight. Especially if you're a kicker like myself, my right hip is locked and extremely tight. I went from Taekwondo to being a soccer player to being a kicker in American football and a punter as well, to a career being known for my right kick. My right hip has taken a lot of damage, which has caused many different things to be off balance. But stretching, mobility, getting that lacrosse ball in that foam roller, once to twice a day, it's just gonna help you perform better as a martial artist and as an athlete. So don't wait until your end of your career in your 30s or when you're injured or sore to add this to your training. It should be part of your daily routine, whether you're training or not, and especially on your recovery days. I'm also gonna lump into number 1 is strength and conditioning. It's not on my list, but a lot of martial artists don't value that side of being an athlete. So I'm gonna group it as 1, but because I've been doing it since I was 13 years old, I've been in the weight room learning about athletic development, especially in university. I have a degree in health and physical education. So understanding energy systems and ways to develop more power in the weight room is a big benefit. But my number 1, stretching, yoga, and mobility. The second area, which I wish I understood more in my 20s, is about recovery. I knew from university that building in recovery days is really important because it's the recovery day that is where you actually get better, where all that stress and the damaging of the muscles and the nervous system, you need those recovery days to get better. So you actually get better when you are resting. Where in off-camp time or when you're not fighting, it's a little easier to take those breaks because mentally you're not as stressed, you don't have as much anxiety about the fight coming up. But you'll notice that as soon as a fight is booked, whether it's 8 weeks, 3 weeks, 2 weeks, as you get closer to your fight, you're gonna get a little bit more stress and anxiety and you're gonna not feel like you're ready. I always give the example of when you're at school and you're gonna write a test. You could be studying every day, know everything and be really well prepared, but as soon as the exam comes, you feel like you don't know anything, so you feel like you need to cram more and you stress yourself out more. So understanding that near the end of your camp, you are gonna be more tired, you're on a calorie deficit because most likely you're cutting weight, that it's okay to take those rest days. It's not gonna impact your performance on fight night. If anything, it's gonna help you. It's gonna help keep your muscles more strong, relaxed, and exploding like we wanted to. We've prepared all the way up to this point to be able to peak on fight night, and by not resting, you're just damaging that whole 8-week period, if not all year program that your coach and your strength and conditioning program has you on. So, understanding that little bit of break, especially near the end of camp, is just gonna help your immune system. I had a bad habit of wanting to push myself. Not only was I working full-time as a teacher with my training on calorie deficit, plus the stress of the fight, your immune system takes a big beating. So at that point, those rest days are just gonna help you keep your immune system strong and hopefully go into fight day not sick. A lot of times when I competed, I ended up getting sinus infections probably the week of the fight, and having to fight with a sinus infection or some form of antibiotics is just taking away from the performance and you getting that win that you worked so hard for physically and mentally. The third thing I wish I understood more in my 20s, and it's about concussions and brain recovery. Back in my 20s, it sounds weird, but the understanding of concussions and brain health is fairly new when it comes to martial arts. Back when I was competing as an amateur and even my early Taekwondo days, getting knocked out really, or having concussions really wasn't known and with the long-term effects. You knew it wasn't good for you, but all you were told is basically try not to fall asleep at night. And that's the only information you got from your doctors. And then the next day you would continue to do what you had to do and move on with your life. But as we got older and we started understanding more, especially at the end of my career where concussions became a problem, you really have to start understanding that it's the prevention that really helps the long-term damage. Yes, this is a sport we love and it involves, lots of sparring. It involves, fighting on a regular basis and you damaging yourself and your opponent. But it's what we do and what we love. And we're gonna continue to do it. But if we can do it in a more safer way, in ways that we build in breaks when we do get big head injuries or we have minor headaches, those little breaks and those recovery periods just gonna help us, elevate our career, perform better, perform more often, safer, and actually finish a career with our full mental health, which again should be the key. We're gonna do martial arts our entire life, so let's stay safe and healthy doing it. So some of the tips I'll suggest, and I'll create another video with more information on how I like to tell my athletes to follow brain injuries. Usually after a concussion, I always recommend, number one thing, taking a break. You don't want multiple head injuries. You don't want to keep getting hit. You need to take your break, make sure and monitor your heart rate, because usually with a concussion, you're going to notice your heart rate is more elevated than usual. So we're going to make sure before we get back into training, our resting heart rate is back to normal. I recommend a lot of fish oils, a lot of water and fluids on a daily basis. And again, I've been a big believer in CBD oils, but ultimately it comes down to your rest and recovery and slowly bringing back your training. If you just got hurt in your fight, take some time off before contact and sparring. Let yourself heal. Your knees, your joints, as well as your brain all need that full recovery period. The fourth thing that I wish I added more in my career in my 20s was actually boxing. I was known as a kick fighter and I got away finishing everybody with my low kicks. But there was a time in my career, especially in the upper ranks of glory, fighting guys like Mark DeBont, Francois Ambang, Gaji, Nicky Holtzkin. Those guys had some really good boxing techniques because they all had, close to almost 100 professional fights when speaking about, Gaji and Nicky Holtzkin. So I really felt that at that point in that tournament in Japan that my hands needed to be a little bit better and sharper. So that's when I brought in a boxing coach. I mean, now that, MMA is the big push, the big issue in my eyes is too many different striking coaches makes things confusing for the athlete. Most, modern day mixed martial artists have a boxing coach, a kickboxing coach, and it's just too many things going on at once. It's nice to have a coach that knows and understands the kick fighting as well as the boxing. Both are different sports. Your boxer might tell you one way or the other way, but the idea is having one main coach, and that's where I had my kickboxing, but it's nice to have sprinkled in a little bit of boxing. That little bit of that boxing, maybe once a week, is just gonna help me develop my confidence, one, in my boxing, but it helped me a lot with defensively. I use boxing as a way to help with my shell defense. If I can defend myself well against a boxer who's really good at cutting angles and using his hands and not really focusing on his kicks, that's just gonna give me more confidence in the fight to be able to sit there and defend those big heavy punches when needed. And still lets me use my kick fighting. So whether you're a boxer, maybe that once a week or that little splash could be adding in a Muay Thai pad holder or some Muay Thai sparring, or maybe adding some Taekwondo kicks. Not only, it doesn't have to be the main part of the game plan, but it's nice to keep you interested, keep you learning a different art, and just makes things fun. Especially if you're a professional watching this video, you're gonna realize doing the same thing, it's nice, the basics are important, but that little bit of difference is just gonna stimulate your mind, make you think a little bit more, and just make training fun for you. So adding that little splash of the opposite style of what you're used to. The fifth thing that I wish I did earlier on in my career in my 20s, it's going to be opposite stance fighting. Usually when you start martial arts, especially from a young age, you're always asked to pick one side. So usually the question I ask someone when they're new to kickboxing is I ask, what foot would you kick a soccer ball with? Whether they put their right foot, okay, then you're an orthodox fighter, I get them to put their right foot behind them. So usually at that point, you're always in that orthodox stance and you're doing your pad work, your shadow boxing, you're drilling all from a similar stance. But as you noticed in modern MMA and in kickboxing and even boxing itself, you'll see a lot of the athletes switching stances and being able to fight orthodox and southpaw. My entire career, if you watch my fights from a beginner all the way up to my world title fight, you'll notice that I never switched stance once. It just wasn't something my coach and I worked. But following my career, I went through a whole thought process of thinking, okay, I was a dominant striking athlete, but how could I be that much more dominant? How could I be that much better as a martial artist? And then I decided right after my career that I went full-time southpaw. So now, 4 or 5 years later, after my last fight, I'm now, proficient in both stances, which now when I spar with people, I can create different offense, different types of angles, and be that just that much more confusing to my partners and my opponents. So it definitely has helped me out. So now, even in my curriculum here at Bazooka Kickboxing and MMA, I add little bits of days, maybe units of opposite stance fighting. So when you do get to that pro level, you do have that little basics. And if you watched my videos and been following, you don't have to be perfect on the opposite stance, right? As long as you're good defensively on one side and you have your main power side, it's just a nice opportunity. Maybe you throw a shot and end up in the opposite stance. It's nice to be able to at least have a good few power combinations ready to go. When I go southpaw, I really like my left kick or my left straight. Right? So work on a few strikes, get good at them. This way you can work on those different ways of shifting or backstepping to get to that opposite stance and then do some damage from that opposite. So if you're a southpaw, once in a while, get on the bag, do some shadow boxing where you're switching stances. It makes fighting a little bit more advanced, but that's the fun part of martial arts, is constantly getting better, learning, improving. And then once you be able to mix both stances, you become a master of both, understanding angles, and it just makes you that much better of a martial artist. So if you keep liking these videos, make sure you keep liking, subscribing to the channel, hit the bell notification to keep up to date. Make sure you share all these videos with your friends. My goal here is to get this channel to 100K subscribers. So make sure you keep following and liking Bazooka Kickboxing and MMA.